Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months, looking for signs of alien life. Earth's government wanted to make peaceful contact with other species, and Morrison's crew was trained for exactly that purpose. Dr. Lisa Grant worked at her science station, scanning nearby star systems for unusual energy readings. She was the ship's chief science officer and had spent years studying possible alien technologies. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes focused intensely on the data streaming across her monitors. Commander, Ryan Burke checked the tactical systems from his position. He was responsible for the ship's weapons and defenses, though everyone hoped they would never need them. Burke was a tall man with graying hair and steady hands. He had served in the Colonial Defense Force for 20 years before joining this mission. The Defiance was not a warship. It was built for exploration and diplomacy. The ship carried translation computers, cultural databases, and gifts from Earth. Morrison's orders were clear. Make friends, not enemies. Learn about alien civilizations and invite them to join humanity in peaceful cooperation. Captain, I'm detecting something unusual, Dr. Grant called out. Her voice carried excitement and concern. There are energy signatures consistent with weapons fire about 2 light hours away. Morrison walked over to look at her readings. The data showed massive energy discharges and what appeared to be explosions. Could it be a battle? That's what it looks like, Grant replied. Multiple ships, very advanced weapons, the energy levels are enormous. Burke turned from his station. Sir, if there's a fight happening, we should be careful. We don't know who's involved or why they're fighting. Morrison nodded. First contact with aliens was always risky, but finding them in the middle of a war made it even more dangerous. Still, this was exactly the kind of situation his mission was designed for. Maybe the Defiance could help stop the fighting and make peace between the warring species. Set course for the battle zone, Morrison ordered. But keep us at a safe distance. We'll observe first and then decide how to approach. The Defiance changed direction and increased speed. As they got closer to the battle, the ship's sensors picked up more details. There were dozens of ships fighting each other in 2 distinct groups. One group had larger ships with crystalline hulls that glowed with internal energy. The other group flew smaller, more organic-looking vessels that seemed almost alive. The larger ships are definitely winning, Grant reported. The smaller vessels are being destroyed at a rapid rate. It's not even close to a fair fight. Morrison watched the tactical display as the smaller ships tried desperately to escape. Many were badly damaged and their crews were clearly outmatched. The larger ships pursued them without mercy, destroying any vessel that couldn't keep up. This looks like genocide, Burke said grimly. The big ships aren't just trying to win, they're trying to wipe out the other species completely. Dr. Grant agreed. The smaller ships are using much more primitive weapons. Their technology is at least 50 years behind the attackers. They never had a real chance. Morrison made his decision. Open a communication channel on all frequencies. Let's try to stop this massacre. The communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Chen, worked quickly to broadcast Earth's standard first contact message. The transmission included mathematical sequences, star charts showing Earth's location, and universal symbols for peace. It was designed to show that humans were intelligent, peaceful, and wanted to talk. The effect was immediate. All the ships in the battle stopped firing and turned toward the Defiance. Morrison felt a moment of hope. Maybe the fighting would end, and they could help negotiate peace between the 2 species. But then the larger ships opened fire on the Defiance. Shields up, Burke shouted, his hands flying over the tactical controls. Energy beams and plasma bolts struck the human ship from multiple directions. The Defiance's quantum shields absorbed the attacks without any visible effect. Damage report, Morrison called out. No damage, sir, reported Chief Engineer Pete Davis from the engine room. Their weapons can't penetrate our shields. It's like they're using antique technology. The attacking ships seemed surprised that their weapons had no effect. They increased their rate of fire, pouring more energy into their assault. Still, the Defiance's shields held easily. Dr. Grant monitored the alien communications. Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from the attacking ships. They're calling us Corvani allies and demanding our surrender. Corvani? Morrison asked. That must be what the smaller ships call themselves. The attackers are identifying themselves as the Zephyrian Empire. More Zephyrian ships arrived, surrounding the Defiance. Their leader sent a message that the translation computer quickly decoded. The voice was harsh and demanding. Unknown vessel, you will surrender your defensive technology to the Zephyrian Empire immediately. Your interference in our conquest of the Corvani Republic will not be tolerated. Submit now or be destroyed. Morrison looked around the bridge at his crew. They had come here hoping to make peace, but the Zephyrians weren't interested in peace. They only understood force. The captain had to make a choice that would affect not just his ship, but possibly all of humanity's future relationships with alien species. Sir, they're charging their weapons again, Burke reported. Energy levels are increasing across their entire fleet. The Corvani ships that were still functional had moved away from the battle. They seemed to be watching to see what would happen between the humans and the Zephyrians. Morrison realized that his next decision would send a message to both alien species about what kind of neighbors humans would be. Captain, Dr. Grant said quietly, I don't think we can reason with them. The Zephyrians seem to respect only strength. Morrison stared at the view screen, where dozens of alien warships prepared to attack his single ship. He had hoped for peaceful first contact, but sometimes peace had to be defended with force. The Zephyrians had already shown they would destroy anyone who got in their way. Commander Burke, Morrison said slowly, prepare to defend the ship, but try to disable their vessels if possible. I don't want to start an interstellar war on our first day meeting aliens. Burke's fingers hesitated over his controls. Sir, our weapons are designed to fight human ships. Against their technology. I know, Morrison replied. But we don't have a choice. They're not going to let us leave peacefully. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire again, and this time Morrison knew. His response would change everything. Commander Burke's hands moved across his tactical controls with practiced precision. The Defiance had been built for exploration, but like all human ships, it carried serious weapons. Earth's history of constant warfare had taught humanity to always be prepared for a fight. Targeting non-critical systems on the lead Zephyrian vessel, Burke announced. He wanted to disable the alien ship without killing its crew. The ship's artificial intelligence, programmed by Dr. Amy Chen before the mission, calculated the best way to stop the enemy without causing unnecessary death. Captain Morrison watched as Burke selected their first target. It was a massive Zephyrian dreadnought, easily 10 times the size of the Defiance. Its crystalline hull glowed with internal energy, and dozens of weapon ports lined its surface. To the aliens, it must have seemed impossible that one small human ship could threaten such a giant. Firing kinetic railgun, Burke said. The railgun launched a tungsten rod at 15% the speed of light. The projectile was only a few inches long, but it carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear bomb. It struck the Zephyrian ships forward, section and punched completely through the hull, leaving a perfectly round hole. The dreadnought shuddered and began to drift, its engines damaged. Emergency lights flickered along its hull as the crew tried to understand what had happened. Their shields had been designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds. Direct hit, Burke reported. Their engines are offline, but life support is still functional. The other Zephyrian ships seemed confused. Their sensors had detected no energy discharge from the human vessel. They couldn't understand how their flagship had been crippled by an invisible attack. Several smaller ships moved closer to the Defiance, trying to get better sensor readings. Dr. Grant monitored alien communications from her science station. Captain, they're asking each other what kind of weapon we used. They've never seen anything like our railgun technology. Lieutenant Commander Steve Harris coordinated the tactical display from his position. The young officer had served on 3 different ships before joining the Defiance crew. He watched as more Zephyrian vessels approached, their commanders apparently deciding that the damage to their flagship was just lucky. They're surrounding us, Harris reported. 12 ships in attack formation. They think they can overwhelm us with numbers. Morrison felt a growing sense of dread. He had hoped that disabling one ship would convince the Zephyrians to negotiate. Instead, they seemed determined to continue fighting. The captain realized that showing restraint might be interpreted as weakness by a military culture that only respected strength. "Sir, they're charging weapons again," Burke warned. "All ships are targeting us simultaneously." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and plasma bolts filled space around the Defiance. The human ship's quantum shields absorbed the massive bombardment without any visible effect. To the aliens, it must have looked like their weapons were hitting an invisible barrier. "Still no damage," reported Chief Engineer Pete Davis. "Our shields are operating at only 12% capacity. Their weapons can barely scratch us." Dr. Grant looked up from her station with a troubled expression. "Captain, I'm analyzing their weapon technology. It's incredibly primitive by our standards. They're using focused plasma and particle beams that we abandoned 300 years ago." Morrison began to understand the terrible truth. Humanity had developed its weapons during centuries of fighting other humans. Earth's nations had created increasingly deadly technologies to penetrate defenses that they themselves had invented. It was an arms race that had pushed human military science far beyond what most species would ever need. The Zephyrians had conquered their empire by fighting species with similar technology levels. They had never encountered weapons designed to overcome advanced defensive systems. Their tactics and equipment were completely inadequate against human military doctrine. "Captain," Burke said quietly, "they're not going to stop. Their culture seems to view retreat as impossible. If we don't stop them now, they'll keep attacking until we're forced to destroy them." Morrison looked at the tactical display. More Zephyrian ships were arriving from deeper in their territory. The aliens were calling in reinforcements, preparing for a major battle against the single human vessel. They couldn't accept that their mighty empire was powerless against one small ship. "Dr. Grant, any luck with communications?" Morrison asked. "I've tried 17 different approaches, sir. They're not interested in talking. Their leaders keep demanding our surrender and the transfer of our defensive technology." The captain made a difficult decision. "Commander Burke, use quantum torpedoes. Target their engines and weapon systems. Try to disable as many ships as possible without destroying them completely." Burke nodded and began selecting targets. Quantum torpedoes were humanity's most advanced weapon. They could phase shift through solid matter and detonate inside enemy hulls. The technology had been developed during Earth's last Great War, when human nations had learned to hide their most important systems deep inside heavily armored ships. The first torpedo phased through the hull of a Zephyrian cruiser and exploded inside its engine room. The ship's reactor went critical, but emergency systems contained the explosion. The vessel was disabled but intact, its crew shaken but alive. "One down," Harris reported. "Clean disable, minimal casualties." Burke continued firing, each torpedo precisely targeted to cripple rather than destroy. Zephyrian ships began losing power and drifting helplessly. Their crews had never experienced anything like it. Weapons that could ignore shields and armor were beyond their understanding. "Doctor," Grant monitored enemy communications as panic spread through the alien fleet. "Captain, they're calling for immediate withdrawal. Their commanders are reporting weapons that violate known physics." But it was too late for an orderly retreat. Burke had disabled most of the Zephyrian ships, and the few that remained functional were trying desperately to escape. The proud empire that had conquered dozens of species was fleeing from a single human vessel. Morrison watched the tactical display as the last Zephyrian ships jumped to hyperspace. The battle was over, and not a single human had been hurt. But the captain knew that this victory would have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. "Sir," Dr. Grant said softly, "the surviving Corvani ships are approaching. They want to communicate." Morrison nodded. At least one species in this system might be interested in peaceful contact, but he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the worst possible way. The news traveled faster than the Defiance could move. Hyperspace communication networks carried the story across the galaxy in a matter of days. Each time the tale was retold, it grew more incredible and more frightening. On the Zephyrian capital, World of Krex Prime. Admiral Torvik faced the Empire's high command. The military leader sat in stunned silence as he described the battle. A single unknown vessel had destroyed their most powerful fleet without taking any damage. The survivors could barely explain what they had witnessed. The enemy weapons passed through our shields like they didn't exist, Admiral Torvik reported. His voice shook as he remembered watching his ships die. Our best armor was useless. They could strike anywhere on our vessels without warning. General Kazruth, the Empire's supreme military commander, studied the sensor data from the battle. The readings made no sense. The human ship had fired projectiles at impossible speeds and used energy weapons that behaved unlike anything in Zephyrian databases. How many ships did they have? General Kazruth asked. One, Admiral Torvik replied. Just one ship destroyed our entire third battle fleet. Meanwhile, on the neutral trading station of Haven Point, the story spread through the merchant networks. Captains from dozens of species gathered in the station's cantinas, sharing rumors and speculation about the mysterious new power that had appeared in the galaxy. Captain Jexlar of the Vorthon Consortium had heard the story from 3 different sources. Each version was different, but all agreed on the basic facts. A single ship from an unknown species had completely destroyed a Zephyrian battle fleet in minutes. I heard they used weapons that could destroy planets, Jexlar told his fellow traders. The Corvani survivors say the human ship was the size of a moon and carried weapons that could crack worlds in half. Of course, none of that was true. But fear and amazement had a way of changing facts into legends. By the time the story reached the galactic core, people were talking about massive human battle fleets that could appear anywhere without warning. Back on the Defiance, Dr. Lisa Grant worked with the Corvani survivors to establish proper communication. The blue-scaled aliens were grateful for their rescue, but they were also terrified of their rescuers. They had watched human weapons do things that should have been impossible. Ambassador Kreldai was the senior Corvani diplomat among the survivors. He had spent his life studying military technology and galactic politics. What he had witnessed challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. "Your weapons," Kreldai said to Captain Morrison through the translation computer. "They are like nothing we have seen. How is it possible for solid projectiles to move so fast?" Morrison tried to explain railgun technology in simple terms, but the concepts were difficult for the alien to understand. The Corvani had never developed kinetic weapons beyond simple chemical propulsion. The idea of using magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to such incredible speeds was completely foreign to them. "We developed these weapons fighting wars on our own world," Morrison explained. "When different human nations fought each other, we had to create better ways to break through each other's defenses." Kreldai was shocked. "Your species fought wars against itself? With weapons this powerful?" Morrison nodded sadly. "For thousands of years. We only stopped when we realized we might destroy our entire planet." The Corvani diplomat struggled to understand this concept. Most species in the galaxy had achieved space travel before developing truly devastating weapons. They had expanded to multiple worlds before their military technology became dangerous enough to threaten entire populations. Humans were different. They had spent centuries perfecting the art of war before leaving their home system. Every human ship carried weapons designed to fight other humans, and human defensive technology had evolved to counter human offensive capabilities. On the hegemony capital world of Zentara, Supreme Chancellor Vex Thule convened an emergency meeting of the Inner Council. The hegemony controlled over 200 star systems, making it one of the most powerful governments in the galaxy. But the reports from the Zephyrian border had shaken even their confidence. Intelligence officer Zara Kett presented her analysis to the council. She had spent days reviewing every piece of information about the mysterious human ship and its capabilities. "Based on our analysis of Zephyrian sensor data," Zara Kett reported, "this human vessel possesses technology at least 500 years more advanced than our own. Their weapons operate on principles we do not fully understand." Counselor Mordex leaned forward in his chair. "What about their numbers? How many ships do they have?" "Unknown," Zaraket admitted. "We have confirmed the existence of only one vessel, but that may be because they have not yet revealed their full strength." The council members exchanged worried glances. If humans had fleets of ships as powerful as the one that had destroyed the Zephyrians, they could conquer the entire galaxy. Every existing government would be helpless against such overwhelming technological superiority. What do we know about their intentions? Asked Councillor Telvin. The Corvani report that the humans initially attempted peaceful communication. Zaraket replied. They only attacked after the Zephyrians fired first. This suggests they may not be inherently aggressive. Chancellor Vexthul stood and walked to the great window overlooking the capital city. Perhaps, but a species with such power cannot be ignored. We must decide whether to treat them as potential allies or inevitable enemies. On dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Species that had never heard of Earth were suddenly forced to consider how they would respond to humanity's arrival. Some saw opportunity in allying with such a powerful new force. Others saw only the threat of eventual conquest. Dr. Grant continued her research aboard the Defiance, analyzing data from multiple alien species. She was beginning to understand something that horrified her. Most galactic civilizations had developed space travel and formed empires without ever creating truly advanced weapons. They had conquered through superior numbers, better organization, and incremental technological advantages. None of them had experienced the kind of total warfare that had shaped human military development. They were completely unprepared for weapons designed by a species that had spent millennia trying to kill itself. Captain, Dr. Grant said to Morrison, I think we need to contact Earth immediately. The galaxy is about to change and we need to be prepared for what comes next. Morrison nodded. He had reached the same conclusion. Humanity had wanted to join the galactic community as friends and equals. Instead, they had arrived as conquerors, whether they wanted to be or not. The question now was what they would do with that power. The Galactic Council had never held an emergency session like this one. Representatives from 47 different species gathered on the neutral world of Astoria Prime, their ships filling the orbital stations around the planet. Everyone wanted answers about the mysterious humans and their terrifying weapons. Council Speaker Morden called the session to order. The ancient Etherian had lived for over 800 years and had seen many crises, but nothing like this. His long, pale fingers gripped the ceremonial staff as he addressed the assembled delegates. We are here to discuss the emergence of a new species calling themselves humans, Morden announced. 3 weeks ago, a single human vessel destroyed an entire Zephyrian battle fleet. We must decide how the galaxy should respond to this development. Ambassador Helen Wright sat in the newly installed human section, feeling completely overwhelmed. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Proxima colony when the emergency message arrived. Now she found herself representing all of humanity before an alien council that viewed her species as either saviors or destroyers. Wright was a small woman with graying hair and intelligent brown eyes. She had spent her career in diplomacy, but nothing had prepared her for this situation. Earth's government had sent her with instructions to emphasize humanity's peaceful intentions. But the evidence of human military power made those words seem hollow. The Zephyrian representative, General Harkin, stood to address the council. His crystalline form glowed with angry red light as he spoke. The humans are a threat to galactic civilization. Their weapons are beyond anything we have encountered. We must act before they decide to conquer us all. Murmurs of agreement came from several other military-oriented species. The Kelvari Dominion and the Nexus Alliance had both built their empires through conquest. They understood the threat that superior military technology represented. But the Corvani delegate, Ambassador Kreldai, stood to offer a different perspective. The humans saved my people from extinction. They could have destroyed both fleets, but they showed restraint. They only fought after being attacked. Dr. Ben Torres, a human philosopher who had arrived on a cultural exchange ship weeks before, the crisis requested permission to speak. He was a tall, thin man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. His presence on Astoria Prime had been pure coincidence, but now he found himself explaining human nature to an audience of aliens. My fellow council members, Torres began, I understand your fear. Humans do possess powerful weapons, but we developed them out of necessity, not choice. For thousands of years, our species fought against itself. We created these technologies to survive wars with other humans. The Etherian representative, Counselor Silith, leaned forward with interest. You fought wars against your own species? This is difficult for us to understand. Most civilizations achieve unity before developing such destructive capabilities. Torres nodded sadly. Humanity took a different path. We learned to make war before we learned to make peace. But that same conflict taught us the true cost of violence. We know what happens when advanced weapons are used without restraint. General Harks interrupted angrily. Your words are meaningless. We have seen what human weapons can do. A single ship destroyed vessels that had conquered dozens of worlds. What happens when you decide we are enemies? The council chamber fell, silent as delegates considered this question. Wright knew this was her moment to speak. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of 47 species' attention focused on her. General Harks raises a fair concern, Wright said carefully. But I want you to understand something important about human military doctrine. Our weapons seem overwhelming to you because we designed them to fight other humans with similar technology. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. For centuries, human nations developed better weapons and stronger defenses. Each advance in offensive capability led to advances in defensive technology. It was an arms race that pushed our military science far beyond what most species would ever need. Counselor Telvin of the Vorthan Consortium studied the display with interest. You are saying that humans developed these weapons to fight enemies with comparable technology? Exactly, Wright replied. Our railguns were designed to penetrate shields and armor that could stop energy weapons. Our quantum torpedoes were created to overcome defensive systems that could deflect kinetic projectiles. We never intended to create weapons that would be overwhelming against other species. The Council's war computer specialist, a mechanical, being called Unit 7792, provided strategic analysis. I have run simulations based on available data. Even with combined fleets from all major powers, the probability of defeating human forces is less than 3%. This announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. Species that had never known fear suddenly understood how vulnerable they were. The balance of power that had existed for thousands of years was completely destroyed. But then Kreldai spoke, again. The humans had the power to destroy both our fleets completely. Instead, they chose to disable Zephyrian ships while protecting Corvani survivors. This shows restraint and moral judgment. Counselor Jextar of the Merchant Guild raised another point. The humans have offered to share some of their non-military technologies. Their medical advances could benefit all species. Their manufacturing techniques could revolutionize our economies. Dr. Torres stepped forward again. That's exactly what we want to do. Humanity has always been at its best when working with others. We've learned from our mistakes. The same species that once fought brutal wars against itself also created beautiful art, advanced science, and eventually found peace. General Harks remained unconvinced. Peace imposed by superior weapons is not true peace. It is merely delayed conquest. Then what do you propose? Asked Morden. Should we declare war on a species we cannot defeat? Should we live in fear of neighbors who have shown no aggressive intentions toward us? The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates argued for preemptive action, despite the impossibility of success. Others suggested immediate surrender and acceptance of human dominance. A few proposed trying to develop comparable weapons, though their scientists admitted this would take centuries. Wright listened to the arguments with growing despair. Humanity had hoped to join the galactic community as equals and friends. Instead, their very presence was tearing that community apart. Fear was driving rational beings to consider impossible wars or shameful surrender. May I suggest an alternative? Wright said, her voice cutting through the debate. The chamber fell silent again. What if we create a new kind of relationship? Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to protect it. She explained Earth's proposal for a mutual defense agreement. Humanity would use its military superiority to prevent large-scale wars and protect smaller species from aggressive empires. In return, other species would share their knowledge and culture with human explorers. You're proposing that humans become the galaxy's police force, observed Counselor Murtak of the Scientific Union. More like the galaxy's guardians. Right. Corrected. We would intervene only to prevent genocide or conquest. Individual species would remain free to govern themselves as they choose. The debate continued for hours, but gradually a consensus began to emerge. The galaxy needed stability, and only human military power could provide it. The question was whether that power would be used wisely. As the session ended, delegates prepared to return to their home worlds with news that would change everything. The age of conquest was over, but the age of human guardianship was just beginning. 6 months after the Defiance incident, the galaxy looked completely different. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, his new flagship, watching as ships from a dozen different species conducted joint training exercises. The sight would have been impossible just a year ago. Morrison had been promoted against his wishes. He preferred exploring unknown systems to commanding fleets, but Earth's government needed experienced officers to lead the new Terran colonial Guard. The organization had been created to fulfill humanity's promise to protect the galaxy's smaller species. The Liberty was 3 times larger than the Defiance, designed specifically for diplomatic missions and peacekeeping operations. Its crew included humans, Corvani, Etherians, and even a few former Zephyrian officers who had joined after their empire collapsed. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in the ship's expanded science section, leading a research team that included aliens from 5 different species. They were studying ways to improve shield technology that could be shared with all galactic civilizations. The work was challenging but rewarding, showing that cooperation could benefit everyone. Admiral, we're receiving a distress call from the Kepler sector, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen from the communications station. Pirates are attacking civilian transports near the border. Morrison nodded to his tactical officer, a Corvani named Veltar, who had learned human military tactics with impressive speed. How many ships? 17 raider vessels, Veltar replied. They're using captured military equipment from the old Zephyrian armories. The pirate problem had emerged after the Zephyrian Empire's collapse. Without central authority, many former military officers had turned to banditry. Their advanced weapons made them dangerous to civilian vessels, but they were no match for human technology. Set course for the Kepler sector, maximum speed, Morrison ordered. And send a message to the pirates on standard frequencies. Tell them they have one chance to surrender before we arrive. Chief Engineer Pete Davis coordinated with his mixed human and alien engineering staff. The Liberty's engines were a hybrid design that combined human efficiency with alien innovations. Working together, the species had created technology better than any of them could have built alone. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Morrison reflected on how much had changed. The Galactic Council had eventually approved the Treaty of Astoria, creating a new framework for interspecies relations. Humanity accepted the role of protector, while other species agreed to share their knowledge and cultures. The treaty wasn't perfect. Some species still feared human dominance, while others resented needing protection, but it was working. Large-scale, wars had ended almost overnight when potential aggressors realized they would face human intervention. Dr. Grant's research team had made breakthrough discoveries by combining human theoretical knowledge with alien practical experience. Etherian philosophy had helped humans understand new approaches to physics, while Corvani biotechnology had advanced human medicine by decades. But the most important change was in how species viewed each other. The old system of conquest and submission was being replaced by cooperation and mutual respect. Smaller civilizations no longer lived in fear of their powerful neighbors. The Liberty dropped out of hyperspace near the pirate attack. Morrison could see 17 raider ships surrounding a convoy of civilian transports. The pirates had already disabled several freighters and were demanding cargo in exchange for the crew's lives. Open a channel to the lead pirate vessel, Morrison ordered. The face that appeared on screen belonged to a former Zephyrian officer named Kezaval. His crystalline features were scarred from some old battle, and his eyes held the desperate look of someone with nothing left to lose. This is Admiral. Morrison of the Terran Colonial Guard, Morrison announced. You are attacking innocent civilians in violation of galactic law. Surrender immediately and your crews will be treated fairly. Kesval laughed bitterly. The famous humans and their mercy. You destroyed my empire and now you offer me fairness? I would rather die fighting than accept charity from the species that made me an outlaw. Morrison felt sympathy for the alien officer. Many Zephyrians had been left homeless when their government collapsed. Some had adapted to the new galactic order, but others couldn't accept the loss of their proud military culture. Your empire fell because it chose conquest over cooperation, Morrison replied. But you don't have to follow that path. There's a place for you in the new galaxy if you're willing to build instead of destroy. Pretty words, Kesval sneered. But I know what humans really are. You pretend to be peaceful while carrying weapons that could shatter worlds. At least we Zephyrians were honest about our intentions. The pirate leader cut the communication channel and ordered his ships to attack. Morrison sighed, knowing that some beings would never accept change. The Liberty's defensive systems easily absorbed the pirates' weapons fire, while Veltar calculated non-lethal targeting solutions. Within minutes, all 17 pirate ships were disabled, and their crews taken prisoner. The civilian convoy was safe and the captured pirates would be given a choice: face justice in the courts or join rehabilitation programs designed to help former military personnel adapt to peaceful careers. As the Liberty secured the area, Morrison received a message from Ambassador Helen Wright on Astoria Prime. The Galactic Council was preparing to vote on humanity's proposal to establish permanent peacekeeping stations throughout the galaxy. The vote looks positive, Wright reported. Even species that were initially hostile are beginning to see the benefits of stability. Trade is flourishing, scientific cooperation is advancing, and worlds that had been under constant threat are finally experiencing peace. Dr. Grant joined Morrison on the bridge, carrying a datapad with her latest research results. Admiral, you need to see this. Our joint research with the Etherian scientists has produced something remarkable. She showed him schematics for a new type of defensive system that could protect entire solar systems from attack. The technology combined human shield generators with Etherian energy manipulation techniques. It would make conquest impossible even for species with advanced weapons. This could change everything, Morrison said, studying the plans. No species would ever again have to fear invasion. That's the idea, Grant replied. We're calling it the Guardian Network. Once it's fully deployed, the galaxy will be truly secure. Morrison looked out at the stars, thinking about humanity's unexpected journey from explorers to protectors. They had never wanted to be the galaxy's dominant species, but they had accepted the responsibility that came with their power. Years of human history had taught them that strength without wisdom led to destruction. But strength combined with compassion could create something better. The galaxy was learning that lesson too, as former enemies became allies and fear gave way to hope. The USS Liberty continued its patrol, carrying a crew that represented the new galactic civilization. Human, Corvani, Etherian, and even reformed Zephyrian officers worked side by side, proving that cooperation was stronger than conquest. In the distance, Morrison could see the lights of peaceful worlds where children of dozens of species played, together without fear. Trade ships carried goods and ideas between civilizations that had once been enemies. Scientists shared discoveries that benefited all life in the galaxy. It wasn't the galaxy that humanity had expected to find, but it was the galaxy they had helped create. The warship that had destroyed empires had ultimately built something far more valuable. A community where peace was not just a dream, but a reality protected by those with the power and wisdom to defend it. The truth was finally clear to everyone. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons, but their willingness to use those weapons in service of justice. The galaxy was safer, not because humans were conquerors, but because they chose to be guardians.